All right, MS-DOSX, let's get started for today. Today is another bonus lecture. It's on two rather small frameworks, the Message UI and Twitter frameworks. So this will not be particularly long, and I have a demo at the end to kind of give you to show you. So just to get started, the Message UI framework is like I said, a very small framework. It has two classes and a delegate protocol to go with each. That's the entire framework. It's just those two classes, and what it provides is standard interfaces for email composition and for SMS composition, which is nice because that it allows you to embed within your application the ability to send email or to be able to send SMS messages without forcing the user to exit the application, go to mail, write an email. So you can do a lot of things right within your application, so that way they can just go, send out that email and then go right back to what they were doing. I found that the mail interface is really useful for being able to submit bug reports. So if you want to be able to submit bug reports from within your application, you can just have a button that pre-populates the email with some debugging information and pre-populates it with the recipient address, and then they can type in a little bit of description about how they produced the bug, and then you can fire off a bug report to you. So in that sense, I found that really useful to be able to submit bug reports right within your application. Okay, so there's two classes. Like I said, one of them, they're both view controllers. The first is the MF Mail Compose view controller. So this is the view controller that's going to define for writing emails. As far as I know, it's pretty much the exact same one that Mail uses already to when you're composing an email inside of the Mail application. Typically, you'll present this modally, but it is just a view controller, so really you can present it however you like. But it typically makes the most sense for it to be modal, so that way it pops up, the user types an email, they hit send or cancel, and then it goes away and they go back to what they were doing. So modal tends to make the most sense for these controllers, but again, it's just a view controller. You can present it however you like. There's one simple class method on the mail compose controller that's can send mail, which is just a Boolean function method. Basically, it just checks whether or not the user has configured any email accounts with the device. If they have, then it returns yes. If they haven't, then it returns no. If you get no back and you try to present the controller, it might not work. So if you get no, then you should not present the controller. So as a rule, you should always check that you can send email before you try to actually present the controller. Okay, and there are a lot of methods on the view controller once you've allocated and initialized one to customize what goes into the mail field. So we can set the subject, we can give it a list of recipients, CC, BCC, putting in the body and indicating whether or not it's HTML formatted. And then if you want to attach data, you can attach data, and then you can specify the MIME type and just a name for the file. The file name here is not really the file name it doesn't have to be the name of the file on disk. It's just kind of a name for the file for the purposes of the email, so that way the different files can be distinguished when somebody receives it. So you can create a mail compose controller. You can set the properties on this that you want. The user, of course, can change them after the fact if they want, after the view has been presented. And then then it's just a very standard interface where you'll get a send button. And once you hit the send button, it'll handle all of the actual overhead of sending the email. That's all done by iOS automatically for you. If you hit cancel and then they choose to save the draft, that's also done for you automatically. That gets saved in Mail's drafts inbox. Otherwise, you can just hit cancel and delete the draft and just kind of discard it altogether. There is a delegate protocol for the Mail Compose view controller. There is one method in it. It's this one. Compose controller did finish with result and error. So the typical use case is for the view controller or other object that presents the mail compose controller to be the delegate for that controller, and then this method will get called when the compose controller is closed. And there are 4 different cases for when the mail compose controller is done. The obvious one is sent. The email was successfully written and sent, and it at least left the inbox and went out to the internet somewhere. You can also choose to save the email, which is basically they type it, they hit the cancel button, and then choose to save the draft rather than discard the draft. If you get canceled as the return code, then they actually did cancel it and nothing will happen. failed will happen is if they try to send and for whatever reason the email can't reach the internet, or just for whatever reason can't, the email just cannot actually send. So it's obviously, since this is a delegate method, it's up to the implementer of this to determine what to do when they get one of these these result codes. But this will let you know what happened to the email, so that way if it failed, you can maybe give an error message saying that the email couldn't send or something. Pretty straightforward. Like I said, it's a single class. It has a protocol with one method in it. Pretty simple. It's just a view controller that you can present. You can do email. I'll give you, like I said, I'll give you a demo at the end. Similarly, there's one for sending SMS messages. Notice, unfortunately, the API doesn't support MMS, so it's just text. The API doesn't support sending images or video along with the SMS message, so it's just the text. But again, there's just a view controller, the MF message composed view controller. Again, this is typically presented modally, but you don't have to. Again, it's just a view controller. You can present it however you like. Just like with mail composing, there's a check for whether or not you're allowed to send SMS messages, and basically this just checks whether or not you have a phone number, I believe. Basically, as long as you are able to send an SMS message, then it returns yes. If it returns no, then you should not attempt to display the controller because it will probably fail.
It will in fact crash the application. I remember debugging an application that had a send text message feature using Macintosh Touch, and it tried popping up reviews and died instantly.
Yeah, so you don't want your app to crash because that will make users very unhappy. So if you get no, don't present that controller because it will crash, which is not very nice. And you'll see, I'll demo it in the simulator, but the simulator obviously can't send SMSs, so you'll see that it will crash if I try to present it. SMSs are a lot simpler than text messages, or than emails. There's two things you can change. There's the recipients, which is just an array of, I think it's either phone numbers in strings, or I guess since iMessage, email addresses. If it supports, I don't know offhand if this controller supports iMessage. I assume it does, but anyway, it's just a list of people who want to receive, and then a string for the body of the message. And these can both be configured up ahead of time. And then they present it. The user can edit that, change it, and then actually send it off. So just like with the mail compose controller, oh, that's a typo. Hold on. That should be message. The message compose view controller delegate has, again, just one method, and it's did finish, basically. And again, it has a result code. There's 3 of them. It's failed, sent, or canceled, so there's no saving of drafts of SMS messages like there is for email, but other than that, sent and failed and canceled work exactly the same as with the mail controller. Makes sense? Pretty straightforward. Like I said, this is not going to be very complicated or long. This framework is pretty small. The other framework I want to talk about is the Twitter framework, which has been available since iOS 5. There's really 2 developer features that the Twitter framework exposes. One is a very simple framework for making Twitter API requests. So these basically are just very simple wrappers for the HTTP response requests that you can make to the Twitter API. And then there's a tweet sheet for composing tweets, basically very much like the mail compose and the SMS compose view controllers. So there's a class, TW request, that's used for making Twitter requests. Look at the documentation for more details about it, but like I said, it's basically just a very simple wrapper for the HTTP requests. You basically specify which API function you want, any parameters to that API function that you want, and then it builds up the URL, makes the request, and gives you back the data. And what's nice is that it takes care of authentication for you. So it uses as long as the user has associated a Twitter account with iOS, then it will just automatically authenticate. You don't have to worry about doing OAuth credentials, which is, if you've ever done anything with OAuth, it's just an absolute pain, which is nice. But fortunately, the API handles all the authentication for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You just make the request you want, and it will just grab it from whatever account the user has designated as the default account. Then we also have the tweet sheet. So there's a tweet compose view controller. Again, this should The use case, again, is that this should be presented in a modal fashion. Again, it doesn't have to be. It's just a view controller. You can present it, again, however you like. But it's a view controller that lets you, that lets you write tweets. Again, there's a sanity method to be able to tell whether or not you are allowed to send tweets. Basically, this just checks whether or not the user has affiliated iOS with their Twitter account, and they've enabled being able to send tweets from third-party applications. Again, if this returns no, don't try to present the controller, it will fail. And there are several methods that you can customize the tweet with, setting the text, attaching images or URLs to them, or removing all images and all URLs. The interesting thing is that these methods all return yes or no. The reason for that is tweets have a 140-character limit, and so if one of these attempts to go over the limit, it will return no, saying that I can't actually add that much text. The one slight difference between the tweet sheet and the others is that once the tweet sheet has been presented to the user, these methods won't work at all. Once it's been presented to the user, you no longer have any control over what goes in, what is being populated in the sheet. The other sheets, you could actually, after it's been presented to the user, you can actually programmatically change what's in the fields. If there's a case for you to do that. The tweet sheet, you cannot do that. Once the user sees it, these will just all immediately fail and return no to you. And unlike the others, the tweet sheet doesn't have a delegate protocol. I think Apple realized that having a delegate protocol with one method is a little bit excessive, perhaps. So what they do, instead of having a delegate, is they have a they have a completion handler for the delegate, and this is again just an Objective-C block that has this particular signature. It returns nothing, and as you can see, the name of the type def is incredibly long. It's TW tweet compose view controller completion handler. That's the name of the type. But again, it's just a block that returns nothing and takes in as input a tweet compose view controller result. So you just specify a block that has that form that takes in as input a result code and returns nothing. Then once the tweet sheet is done, then it will invoke that block on you. And as you can imagine, there are reasonable result codes for the tweet sheet as well, just like there are for sending mail and sending SMSs. Okay, so let me just show you a very, very simple dummy app that I'll post the source for, because I'll only be able to actually show you the mail composer. Good, I get to wait for the simulator to launch. So actually, while that's launching, I'll kind of explain what we have here. So I have a very, very simple nib that has, what are you? That has 3 buttons in it: one to send email, one to send an SMS, and one to send a tweet. And you press it, and it's just gonna invoke this add button, this button tap method on our view controller. And basically, based on which button we press, we're going to present one of the different controllers. So the first thing I do, just to give you guys an example of what you can do with an image, and I didn't want to bundle an image into the application. I actually just took a screenshot here. So this is actually it's often useful to be able to take screenshots of your application, and it used to be rather non-trivial to do that. There's a fairly recent function that you can do this in 5 lines now, where you can take a screenshot. So if you want to be able to take a screenshot, just go ahead and steal this code. The idea is that you just you just create a graphics image context that's the size of the window. Then you tell the Windows layer to render into that context, and then you just take that graphics context and convert it to a UI image, and then you have an image that is the contents of the window. Pretty easy. Okay, so now then this UI image reference, we have an image to present to things. So if, for example, we press the email button, we'll make a mail composer, and we'll add an attachment that's so the attachment function expects the first parameter to be an NS data. So there's a convenience function, UI image ping representation, that takes a UI image and returns NS data in ping format. And then we just say that the MIME type is image ping, and we give it a name like screen capture or something. We set ourselves as the delegate, and then we present it. And then here's the very simple delegate methods for both of these guys. So when the mail composer finished, we'll just dismiss it. So that way the view controller goes away, and we're back to what we were doing before, which is just this screen. So now if I press the email button, we'll get this compose controller, and we'll get a screenshot of the current application state at the time the button was pressed. So I can populate this with email information, and then I can, whatever, hit send. Or if I hit cancel, then you can see there's the options to delete the draft or to save the draft. Just discard it. So there's similar code for the SMS controller and the tweet sheet. Notice that the tweet sheet here, I just specified the completion handler block inline like this. So it's just a block that takes in as input a tweet compose view controller result and doesn't return anything. Okay, so I'll put this up on the website so you guys can take a look at. Like I said, if I try to send an SMS from within the simulator, it will crash. Because you're not allowed to do that. All right, any questions? Like I said, they're both very small, very simple to use frameworks, but if you want to be able to embed emails or SMSs or tweets in your application, it's a really nice way to do it. All right. Okay, and so on the website I posted the I'll say tentative schedule for the remainder of the lectures. We'll try to keep that order as best as we can. If we for some reason aren't ready, a couple of those are new. We may switch the order around just to give us more time to write them, but everything else will be up there. Next time, Glenn's gonna do iCloud on Thursday, and then we have the rest of them after spring break. And then we'll have your presentations for your final projects. That will be during R&R week in here sometime. We'll decide when we get closer to that. All right, you guys have any questions for me? All right, cool.